Up until 1953, New York City used to deliver mail using pneumatic tubes. The pipes were 4 to 5 feet underground, and New York City had 55 miles worth of lining. The question then is, what happened? Why did New York City stop using this ingenious system? Well, in this episode of Origin, we will take a look at the history of the pneumatic mail system. In 1863, the London Stock Exchange, which was the global financial center at the time, decided to implement a 660 feet pneumatic tube connecting the exchange to the central telegraph station in London. It worked, and other cities began to follow. Pneumatic mail system began popping up all over Europe. Berlin, Paris, Vienna, Prague, all built their own citywide tubes in the late 1860s and 70s. New Yorkers started to feel behind their peers in Europe. By the late 1890s, Americans began experimenting with pneumatic tubes, with Philadelphia being the first city to implement one in 1893. 4 years later, New York City built its first pneumatic mail line connecting the General Post Office on Park Row to the Produce Exchange in Bowling Green. This pneumatic mail system was inaugurated and presided over by Senator Chauncey Depew, who then declared, "This is the age of speed. We are ahead of the old country in almost every respect, but we are far behind in methods of communication within our cities. If New York is to be a success, quick communication is absolutely necessary." The first dispatch was sent by Depew himself. It was a Bible wrapped in an American flag, along with a copy of the U.S. Constitution. Quite a package. The return delivery was flowers and a copy of the New York Times. From its very inception, postal workers were infatuated with the pneumatic tubes. They sent all sorts of amusing objects, from food, clothing, to even a cat. In his autobiography, Postal Supervisor Howard Wallace Connolly recalled how it could live after being shot at terrific speed from Station P in the Produce Exchange building, making several turns before reaching Broadway and Park Row. I cannot believe, but it did. It seemed to be days for a minute, but started to run, and was quickly secured and placed in a basket that had been provided for that purpose. Interesting story. Now, let's take a look at the specs of this pneumatic mail tube so you could see how cool it was. The tubes were made of cast iron, with an inside diameter of 8 1/8 inches. The tubes were fastened together by a bolted flange. Direction changes were made with gentle bends and a larger bore diameter that allowed the carrier to negotiate the turn. The tubes were buried 4 to 6 feet beneath the streets. The New York City Post Office had 95,000 steel, cylindrical carriers that resembled artillery shells. They were 24 inches long, 8 inches wide, and weighed 21 pounds. There were doors on each end, and each carrier had a capacity of holding 500 letters. Rotary blowers and air compressors powered by electric motors provided the air pressure needed to run the system. Air pressure ranged from 3 to 8 psi. This was enough power for the carrier to travel at a speed of 100 miles per hour, but normal speed was kept between 30 to 35 miles per hour. The person responsible for sending and receiving carriers were known as rocketeers. There were 136 rocketeers in New York City. There were also dispatchers to ensure operations remain uninterrupted. At its peak, the system carried 95,000 letters per day, about a third of all New York City mail. In Manhattan alone, there were 27 miles of tube, connecting 23 post offices. The system operated from Monday to Friday from 5 a.m. to 10 p.m., on Saturday from 5 a.m. to 10 a.m. There are stories of downtown workers ordering sandwiches from a deli up in the Bronx and receiving them via the tube in 20 minutes. During the 1947 blizzard of New York, mail continued to flow underground and without interruption throughout the crisis. So why would New York City drop such an ingenious system? Lots of reasons are provided in the official reports by the post office, but my research had led me to believe that there are 3 major causes as to why the pneumatic mail tubes was dropped. New York City's population kept growing throughout the 20th century. but the carrying capacity of the pneumatic tube did not. This made this mail delivery system increasingly inadequate to serve the needs of New York City. Breakdowns of the pneumatic tube often required digging up the streets to retrieve clogged mail and restore operation. One person was even killed when a test run caused a tube to violently rupture, so the system was not only cumbersome to repair, but potentially dangerous as well. Running the tube was exorbitantly expensive. In 1917, the lease for the pneumatic mail tube cost the post office $17,000 per mile, and by 1932, the cost had increased to $19,000 per mile. At 27 miles, this comes to over $500,000 per year for Manhattan alone. When adjusted for inflation, this number comes to $9.7 million. This price was simply too much, and that was his ultimate downfall. In 1953, Dwight D. Eisenhower became President of the United States. Upon taking office, he appointed Arthur Summerfield as Postmaster General. The first thing Summerfield did in December that year was seize all pneumatic mail services in all cities. Mail delivery was officially taken over by the automobile. The 136 postal employees formerly assigned to tube service were reassigned to different positions, and that became the end of it. The pneumatic mail system would never see a day of operation ever again. Although the system is no longer operational, the pneumatic mail tube still exists below the streets of New York City today. Most people are just unaware of it. In fact, in October of last year, the pneumatic mail tube had its 122nd birthday, but no one gave it any recognition. So, this video is a way to celebrate this forgotten piece of New York. The pneumatic mail tube gave New York City over 50 years of service and contributed to its evolution as a city. It deserves a place in the New York City history books. Let's not forget about it.
If you come to the main post office in Manhattan, you can still find remnants of the old pneumatic mail line. I'm not going to tell you where it is. You're either going to have to download the Cityscape app and find it, or search for it yourself. Good luck.